we were looking for her for an answer. And she was just like, I don't have one. And I could use your help in figuring this out. And what that did for our team dynamic was amazing. I felt definitely seen. I felt cared for. She was vulnerable with us. And I felt supported where I know that there was this really true collegial love that she had, not just for me, but for our team. And that allowed me to do my best work with my advisory.
Aloha and welcome to the Unrulr Podcast, where we have conversations with innovators, people that are really connected to authenticity and education. I am honored to get to co-host this episode with Kwaku Aning, and maybe like 5 times more honored to get to talk to Carlos Moreno, co-executive director at Big Picture Learning. Kwaku, can you do the intro and let's just dive into the first question?
Sure. I believe that I met Carlos in 2013. Was it 13? At a conference, and I was struck by several things. One, I consider myself moderately tall, and there are few people that I meet that I get to look up to physically. And Carlos is one of those people. But then more importantly, there are few people that I meet randomly that you look up to professionally and personally. And over time, and it was a short period of time, Carlos became one of those people for me. And, I like to make fun of him a little bit, but I also constantly share with him how much I value him as a person and how much I look up to him, even though we're the same age, I think. But the way he sort of moves through the world and how he sort of retains who he is in every space that I've ever seen him in. Mm-hmm. And so to that point, I want to ask you this initial question. Can you talk about how growing up in New York, specifically the Bronx, has shaped the way that you move throughout the world?
Definitely. And first, Aaron, thank you for the invite. And Kwaku, thank you for those kind and generous words. It's hope you know that the feeling is very mutual. Growing up in New York, oftentimes folks, when you tell them you grew up in the Bronx, there are a whole bunch of assumptions that folks make about what your lived experiences were as a young person. And some of those might be true, but what I'll share is that some of the things that are often left out when folks think about a young person growing up in the Bronx are, I was deeply loved. I had 2 amazing parents that did everything and anything that they could for me, that protected me as best as they could. And I had a community around me that wanted to make sure that I was always okay, immediate, like specifically within my neighborhood. So for a long time, I was just a really cheerful, happy, super positive young person that leveraged his size and his height to play sports, right, and have a good time and connect with other folks and was able to navigate the other difficult parts of being in the Bronx, fairly reasonably, until I had a particular moment in time, right, where, and I talk about this a little bit in Finding Your Leadership Soul, is I was assaulted at gunpoint and robbed for an $89 jacket, right after my 15th birthday, on my way home from school. And what really, outside of that, that incredibly traumatic event, right, what stands out of that, from that, was the place where, outside of home, that I looked for comfort, that I looked for safety, which was school, right? Because I spent so much time there because of, the regular school day and then how much time I was spending in my extended day activities and athletics and whatnot. No one cared. No one really paid attention. And even though I was physically worrying what had happened, right, it was obvious. And was just asked to continue to go about my day. And then an angel appeared. I always tell folks, because this is always super important, an angel appeared on my path by the name of Cheryl Williams, who was a community organizer, who was the person that kind of tapped me, literally and figuratively tapped me on the shoulder and was just like, hey, there's a different way, because I was definitely going down an incredibly dark path. That was informed and generated because I felt like I needed to be safe more than anything else. Who kind of cared for me in the way that I really needed. I would not be here talking to y'all if it wasn't for Cheryl Williams. So I feel like without ever explicitly naming it, and this is probably the first time, I feel like I try to show up and to get to the core of your question, Kwaku, is in the ways that Cheryl Williams showed up for me as someone who wasn't my parent, who wasn't a school teacher, who was just someone in the community that saw something in me and wanted to guide and support me along the path, right? And help me navigate through some really, really hard times, who kind of just saw me, right? Beyond just the physical, right? Like really got to know me, and supported me through high school, supported me through the early parts of college, like getting into college, navigating through college early on. So I carry that spirit of Cheryl Williams with me.
I love that. Kwaku, you want to build off that?
Yeah. Can you, and I know it's for me, it's fairly obvious, but I'm trying to ask you questions from the perspective of people who don't know you, who maybe have read your book or haven't read your book. Can you talk about how you have channeled Cheryl within your different roles within education?
Yeah, well, I knew early on. So I'm a non-traditional route educator, right? I worked in for-profit for a number of years, worked in some international nonprofit for some more years, until I found my way into this education space, in this non-conventional education space, because I knew firsthand that I did not want to at any point go into the classroom and to be a traditional school teacher. There's no reason for me to do that, especially given the experiences I had and the limited amount of folks that I encountered on my path that I can say, these are the folks that I felt really cared for me in different ways, which some of them, of course, that I do mention in the book. And then I ran into, and then I was pulled into this big picture learning design and model, right? That was so heavily centered around relationships, right? And I was like, what? And then, on paper it sounds great. And then you see it and you're like, whoa, they're really focused on knowing and caring about these young people in really authentic, deep ways. And wait a minute. And it is absolutely bi-directional. The young people the young people are caring about the adults in ways that I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't give a shit about my teachers. I mean, outside of to be real. I didn't want any harm to happen to them ever, but totally. I was just like, wait, they knew about each other's lives. It was a beautiful, when I was able to see it. So anyway, that for me was one that called me, because I didn't know what it was to be a teacher. So it just kind of spoke to who I was and the type of educator that I feel like if and when I would jump into that space, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do. And then when I shifted and moved into school leadership in the most formal sense, my goal was to do that for the adults, right? How do I support and love on the adults get to know them really well so they can do their absolute best for the students. Because my job was no longer to directly work with young people; it was to work with the adults to help support them and being their very best selves, to be as healthy as possible, so we don't bring any of our brokenness into the lives of young people, and we support them and lift them up. And then that just transitioned really kind of like down the line, right? Now I tend to do that try my best to do that for a national organization that's doing really good work to support others in that way. And that's just, honestly, Kwaku, that's just how I really try to show up. And it feels like it's who I am, right? Like it just feels natural. Like I don't feel like I'm performing. I don't feel like I'm putting on airs. I really try to be present. And at the end of the day, it can be exhausting at times, right? To be ever present for a lot of people at the same time.
Yeah.
I won't even name that. I won't even deny that, but it's absolutely worth it. If I'm going to be exhausted over something, that's the work for me.
I'm going to say one thing before you move on, Aaron. The thing that you're not mentioning is how you do this for people that aren't even in your organization. You do this for me personally in so many ways, whether it's offering great advice or even just picking up the phone. Like a lot of people at Carlos's phase in life, you really have to go through their EA to get time with them. And every time Carlos is like, just call me. Just call me. Don't worry about it. Just call me. So I just wanted to highlight that because I may never say another nice thing about you. So I wanted to.
I'm so happy this is being recorded. Can I just name that? Can I just name something? Because I was just having this conversation with someone, and I'm upset that I can't remember what it is. I'm fearful of becoming that person that is not accessible.
You're not that person.
But I'm fearful of it. I have been fearful of it for a very long time. I have. And I feel lucky that I have role models and mentors, even if they don't know that they're mentors to me, who are accessible, who are just like, nah, fam, just text me or just give me a call. No, we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And especially if we have a connection, like I don't, I always want to try to avoid going, becoming that person that needs a, quote unquote, a handler or whatever you want to call it. Like I just, and yeah, that's all.
Aaron, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No,
sir.
Please. I'll always take a Kwaku cut off. We go to these conferences and they drain us. I'm not going to name them. They drain us, man.
Let me know if you want me. Let me know if you want me to name them.
And the things that bring us that fill our batteries are like the leadership journeys that you do at South by Southwest or ASUG. But overall, those conferences steal a bit of our soul. The format of them, the weird panels, all those kinds of things like that. Big Bang in Kansas City was the opposite of that. And you led with authenticity, going up on stage. And I was in this session with Victoria and Shawnee from Getting Smart around finding our own kind of leadership. And in that session, I talked about the song Chaos by Black Star, Kweli, and Mos Def, Knowledge of Self. Your book is knowledge of self personified. Like you all have to read this book. It is a journey. It is what you all do in the leadership journeys in real time and written page. There are these beautiful letters to the people that have made an impact on your life. And you talk about a different form of leadership. And in no way is this a brand new form of leadership. These qualities have always been there, right? But we have been colonized to hide them, to get rid of them, to not show them. And in this bizarre ecosystem that is education and education thought leadership, these do not come to the forefront, right? These other buzzwords kind of sneak in. I want you to talk about what leadership soul is, and also why you wrote this book.
Thank you, Aaron. That's Leadership Journeys is it's as giving to me and my team as it is to the folks in the audience. Like I grow with each one of those sessions, and that came from just this need to create a space like that in these big conferences, which is really why it was designed and created. Le- Leadership soul at its core is about folks being able to embrace the humanity in leadership and how we support folks, right? And
Mm.
it is often leadership. I've sadly seen too many models of leadership that is grounded in selfishness,
Mhm.
that is grounded in, who you know. It is grounded in how much airtime that you can consume, how quickly you can process and share, right? Um, and it being this complete like head and mind activity, right? Where there's this inability or discouragement of like feeling, right? And being able to say, I actually have no idea like what to do in this situation. And I've had a couple of models like that. And one I always want to lift up is my first principal, Nancy Diaz, at the Met School in Providence, who I remember as a new principal, especially, right? Like it was her first year as a principal. She had been an experienced master teacher for several years. And she was a brand new principal, and I was a brand new first time teacher. And I remember being in conversations with her with some pretty seasoned, well credentialed, super passionate educators who were super bright, super smart, and she being in a space and being like, "Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't have an answer for that, and I would love your help in figuring that out." And the pivot that I like, right, like, I think I'll include myself as part of the faculty and the teachers, were like, we were looking for her for an answer, and she was just like, I actually I don't have one, and I could use your help in figuring this out. And what that did for our team dynamic was amazing, right? It was completely amazing. It decentered, which she was totally fine with embracing, decentered her as the leader, right? In terms of as the center of the conversation, as the focus of the solution, right? To it being this communal thing. And we don't have a lot of those examples and models. Honestly, I don't. And if they're out there, I'd love to hear more of those, right? So with someone like Nancy specifically, I felt I felt definitely seen. I felt cared for. She was vulnerable with us, and I felt supported. Where I know that there was this really true collegial love that she had, not just for me but for our team, and that allowed me to do my best work with my advisory and some of those young men that are profiled in the book. Um, and that was 14, actually, wow, almost 18 years ago that I was in the classroom, and it still stands with me and still sits with me. Um, and to take it even a step further, I also don't feel like I hear about a lot of men talking about this importance of love, care, and vulnerability in this space. I think our sisters do a much better job at it, right? Which is why I cited in the book around like this type of love, and the work that I'm talking about is one that we can look at the work of Black women, Black and brown women in education and beyond, and how they show up for communities and for people.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second?
No doubt,
I
absolutely.
want to quote one of those amazing Black women.
Please do.
Her name is Brenda Diaz. She's in your book. She's on page 88. She's at Nashville. She is an incredible school leader. I've had the honor of meeting her more than once.
Amen,
She says,
absolutely.
love, care, and vulnerability, which are the three pillars for you, are the foundation of everything that I do as a leader of a high school with students from diverse populations. It is impossible for me to see the work without being empathetic. That empathy is about my own personal journey, but also the ability to sit in the seats of our students and families. It's a powerful quote.
From a powerful woman. And thank you, Aaron, for lifting her up, because I feel like even though there are far few and in between examples that I've seen in our network. We do have some tremendous leaders that I try to acknowledge and lift up in the book, both in our schools, but also some system level leaders through a number of different fellowships and partner organizations that we work together with. So, and the hope is just for it to continue to amplify that, right? That it's okay to do that. So one of the reasons why, kind of also try to put myself out there in a different way in this book.
You mentioned this thing, and I put it in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, the idea of men expressing their vulnerability as part of their leadership. And I wanted to highlight, I think it is even more rare for men of color to do it. There is this armor, or, if you're a fan or knowledgeable about Ashanti out here on the West Coast, or this armor, these masks that we put on in every facet of our life, but especially professionally. Can you talk more about how you're able to balance that vulnerability with the mask that you have to put on to be in the role that you're currently in, or to be in any role within education?
Yeah, that mask used to rarely come off. That mask used to just stay in place for me. And I've been thinking hard and deeply around what was that moment, right, where I was just like, oh, I don't need to do this anymore. And it wasn't a singular moment that I can call on and say, this is when I knew. It's specifically around in a formal leadership role that was more broad outside of a school, right? Where I didn't have to show up in that way, where I felt like I could just show up in this way. I also want to acknowledge that I'm in a pretty privileged position, right? In spite of all my other, attributes, right, and other characteristics, right? I am. I'm the co-executive director of an international organization, so I report to my board, and my board is incredibly supportive. So, and they stand behind statements. They stand behind how I show up and flip just kind of how I speak in different ways that just feels super authentic. And I'm incredibly grateful. And I don't wear the mask as often as I used to.
That's saying a lot. It's saying a lot, because the higher up you go, the more, I'll just be honest, the less we see people who look like us. And so the more guarded we naturally want to become, to sort of preserve that space that we're in. So it speaks to this secret sauce that you have, that I believe you're sharing a little bit, because you can't share everything about your personal experience through a book that leads you to this, but you do a masterful job with what you've written. But the idea of, you talked about it with that principal. You've talked about it with, your experience in the classroom. The idea of the more vulnerable you are, the deeper the connection is, and the more of whatever work, whether it be learning, whether it be building, that can actually happen because you end up on the same team, because you're moving towards something. I don't know. I need your help.
Yeah.
Carlos, we wanted to surprise you with someone else who's seen your leadership. So we're letting Charmaine into the room.
Oh, what are y'all doing?
There we go. That's the look we wanted.
As a surprise.
Yeah.
We wanted people that know you and love you to be able to speak on you as a leader. Kwaku, could you introduce our next guest?
Well, I need to introduce her properly because if I introduce her the way I met her, she will not be super excited with me. Charmaine,
y'all know I love this woman.
I'm sorry, say that again, Carlos?
Do y'all know that I love this woman?
That was
Yes.
the goal in trying to get her to
That's
come
the
on.
idea. That's the idea.
Y'all are terrible.
That is the idea. Charmaine Mercer is the Chief of Equity and Culture at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. That is Charmaine's title. Charmaine is another amazingly powerful, generous leader within education spaces and beyond. And as much as I love and admire her, Carlos is probably there and beyond, because I know that they've worked together on various projects for years, and I actually met the two of them together. If you see Charmaine someplace, Carlos is not that far behind, and vice versa. That's all I'm going to say. So, Charmaine, I'm really sucking up all the oxygen here. I want to make sure that you have time to talk about what a horrible person Carlos is. So I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Charmaine, thank you so much for joining us. I think that the question is like, what leadership qualities does he embody, and what are you proud of in Carlos?
I'm literally humbled to be able to do this. He and I have been like what I would say as peer learners, peer growers, peer leaders in this space. So to be able to share remarks about him from a place of love always is just, I'm filled with gratitude. He was recently quoted as saying, just because we carry it well doesn't mean it isn't heavy. And I thought that was so dope and so powerful. I even sent him a message letting him know that I felt that way. The words were extremely powerful. In this space, I get to thank you. I get to thank you for carrying the load and acknowledging that that load is heavy. In spite of the weight, you do it well. On behalf of all leaders of color, certainly, we appreciate all that you do. And we want you to know that we are here to help you manage and carry the weight. I've watched you in the last decade really deepen and evolve as a leader, and it's been beautiful to watch. You are new in your co-leadership of this international network of schools. As Elliot was sharing in his part, you and I were like the only Black people in this entire sea of people, and we found each other. And from that, I've watched you grow and take your leadership to support other people outside of the network to grow in their leadership. And it's just been absolutely beautiful. I've enjoyed having some small hand in partnering with you. And I just want to thank you for continuing to do it with love, doing it with compassion, and with a bit of style. So,
A little bit.
love, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Carlos, what does Charmaine mean to you?
Listen. She's Charmaine Mercer. Excuse me. She's Dr. Charmaine Mercer. Put some respect on her name, right? To so many, but she's Nikki Jackson to me. And I have been just as inspired watching her step into her leadership over the last decade in different ways. And it's been nice to have a peer friend that you care about and grow together, kind of like on parallel tracks, and process your learning, your joys, your frustration, also an ability to disagree on approaches every now and then, which is really healthy, right? Which I love, because an ability to just almost like siblings to an extent, right? You're like, but I always got your back, right? Doesn't happen often, but the few times that it has, it's been, I think, in general, it's been incredibly healthy, and I've experienced tremendous growth by it. Um, I I think similarly to Elliot, someone who saw qualities in me and my leadership when I perhaps didn't see them myself. Um, I'm incredibly grateful for our friendship, tremendously so.
Mm. I've read this.
Thank you for all that you're carrying and holding,
Mm.
on behalf of all of us.
Mm.
As we know, as history continues to show us that we continue to be on the backs of Black women in a lot of ways. And you are absolutely no exception to that. Like, you make it possible for so many of us to do what we do.
Carlos, you quote Audre Lorde in your book. There's another quote by Audre Lorde that your book really made me think a lot about. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And how you write about leadership, human connection, authenticity, love, courage, those are not the master's tools. Those are the tools of people that want to disrupt that status quo that I think you and so many others are all about. And, Charmaine, how have you seen a more human connected toolkit kind of emerge from Carlos and his leadership?
The work, I mean, in so many ways, I always feel like I don't want to exclude, but there are so many ways. The work that I've observed him, the community that he's put together with both Equity Fellows and then also with Ashe, a toolkit is insufficient to describe it. There's just so many facets of it. But people being anchored in love and relationships as a way of kind of expanding the greatness of all of these leaders is just beautiful. And watching the work deepen by connecting it to place, while maintaining the connection to people and relationships with Ashe has just been, again, it's just amazing to watch that and to see the people in the network who have benefited and to watch them grow when I see them in different contexts. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
I'm welcoming the great Elliot Washor of Big Picture Learning into this podcast episode about Carlos. Elliot, one, thanks for creating Big Picture Learning. Two, thanks for fostering and building capacity in Carlos as a leader, because he's doing a damn good job. Three, what are you proud of in Carlos? What do you see in his leadership?
Well, I see, first off, and I know this got to be brief, and it's hard to be brief for me. But first off, Carlos started this work being a little bit older than most people start this work. He had already done quite a bit in his life. So, and where he led, and he's probably led since he's been very, very young. And that's the je ne sais quoi part of it. You can't explain it. You just, try. Go ahead. So I'll make up some words. I'll put some together. We put together vulnerability, love, and care. Carlos did, and he exudes that. But he also exudes something else in addition. He exudes courage, defined by, and a word that he uses a lot, grace under pressure. And I really appreciate that about Carlos. And that courage is when you put the actor and the act together. So it's an action, not just a person. It's in the work. Carlos knows how to put the toothpaste in a tube. Lots of people do. But the courage that he exudes is phenomenal, and I really do appreciate that. It's a flow, and it's a flow of mind and movement together in a graceful way. It's not guts, because guts kind of never made anybody any money. or any person except maybe a violin manufacturer. We're not talking about cat guts or guts here. We're talking about courage. And if I had one word, I would use that word. Of course, vulnerability, love, care, TLC, VLC. And I love everything that Carlos has done for the work, for everybody going forward. And I know you have a very brief amount of time, so I'm trying to be brief as I can. So love you. Thank you, everybody, for having me on for this moment of, talking about Los a little bit and who he is in one word, courage. Ooh, I got a little blue on my finger there. So, okay. So thank you, Los, for everything. Nice to see you, Charmaine. Nice to see you, Kwaku. Aaron, all good.
Carlos, how'd that make you feel?
Elliot's a big reason I'm here. He's believed in me, and what I would be, what he saw. He saw things in me before I saw them in myself, and he's been my biggest champion, one of my biggest champions. He put me in positions to say, you need to be in this room because they need to hear from you. He's challenged me in healthy ways in terms of my messaging, right? When I talked earlier about the masking, as I was transitioning, is figuring out how to show up in spaces. He would say, don't allow yourself to get pulled into this whole think thing. People always want to talk about how, like, what do you think? And you get into the space of being crazy cerebral. Talk about how you feel. Like, lean into that feel space. Always said that to me. And it's been some of the best advice I've received. I literally had a conversation with Chris Jackson maybe 45 minutes before this call. And I was like, dude, I've had 2 days of kind of just really intense conversations, yesterday and then today, this morning. And I was like, if it wasn't Kwaku and Aaron, I would totally reschedule this call. And he was like, is it that bad? I said, yeah. I said, but the beauty of it is, like, we're familiar. It's not like, it was just like, this is fam. Let me just go in and try to bring my best self into it. And they've been really hard conversations, like organizational stuff. And the universe has a way of giving you what you need. So I'm grateful that I came.
I'm going to say we hope that this, instead of feeling like another thing to do, was actually charged you up a little bit. When it's hard to recognize your effect on people or how much you've grown when you're in the process. You normally need a little bit of space from something to look back and like, oh, I didn't realize I used to do it like that, or now I do these things much better. And it is a singular joy to be part of that process for you today.
Yeah,
definitely.
To be able to honor you in that way.
Absolutely. I am tremendously grateful for this moment, y'all. Sincerely, this was special and it was timely. It was absolutely needed. So thank you.
Well, God moves, right?
Yeah, God moves. Can you throw him a quick final question, and then we'll kind of close out?
Sure. And this will be an easy one. This is a softball for you.
Word.
Why is Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, Porzingis the greatest group of four ever assembled?
No. See, I told him not to talk about that. Yeah.
This call's over. Are you not watching what's happening in New York?
I don't think he understands. I tried to explain to him.
I'm joking. I love the Knicks. I love Jalen Brunson. I love that whole squad.
I don't think you're like the guy who's putting ketchup and mustard on the hot dog. You got to go in one way or the other. You know what I mean? You can't say you
ask
love
the question. Ask the question.
I'm going to ask the question.
No, before, because you opened this Pandora's box. So if that squad was not necessarily like I could totally get behind that Boston squad. That's a tough team.
It's a tough team.
But they don't want to see the Knicks right now. I'm trying to tell you, nobody
Nobody
wants
wants to see the Knicks
to see the Knicks right now. Nobody wants to see the Knicks right now.
I have a meeting in 3 minutes, so let's make this a super.
You're going to brought up Boston. This is,
I know.
It's like, I don't know what you thought was going to happen. All right.
Super quick question.
Super quick
and then
question.
I'm just going to end us out.
What is, if you were to say, hey, you're a leader, you're considering reading this book, and the challenge out of this book is to do what? After you read this book, how are you changing the way you are bringing yourself to your work? If you're to say that really simply, 1 or 2 sentences, what would that be?
I have no. Can you restate that question, brother?
I'm going to restate the question. In an ideal world, after a leader has read your book, what are ways that they will be affected or will change their approach to their work in an ideal world?
I'd like to think that a leader, after reading Finding Your Leadership Soul, would consider slowing themselves down in their leadership. The nature of the work has a tendency to speed us up in ways that sometimes is not healthy. If there's one thing I want our folks to do is to stop and be thoughtful and think about the ripple effects of the decisions that we make. And that requires that we slow down.
Carlos, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about your work?
Thank y'all for having me, Aaron and Kwaku. To find out more about Finding Your Leadership Soul and Big Picture Learning, please go to bigpicturelearning.org. And if you want to see where there'll be further conversations around Finding Your Leadership Soul, you can go to leadershipsoul.org.
If this conversation moves you, please share it. Please like and subscribe, but way more importantly, share it to other people and leaders in your life.